Today has been a good day. Today is the day that I learned about Paraguayan Mickey Mouse. So, in Paraguay, there is a beloved food company, I think they mostly make like packaged snacks and things, called Mickey. And their mascot is this guy. Basically Mickey Mouse, right? Like, it's hard to argue that there's not a resemblance there. And you know how Disney is, right? This is not affiliated with Disney, but you know Disney is just sticklers on having an iron fist around their copyright. So, unsurprisingly, they took Paraguayan Mickey to court. But surprisingly, Paraguayan Mickey won on this technicality that was a bit unexpected, but they argued that Disney does indeed have the copyright to Mickey when he's facing forward. But because Paraguayan Mickey on the packages of the snacks and everything is almost always shown at a profile view, Paraguayan Mickey may stand. And yeah, it was a big win for Paraguay, for Paraguayan Mickey and his fans, and a whole generation that grew up eating these snacks. It also happened at a time where Paraguay was like just transitioning off of like a dictator era, so a lot of this went unnoticed, but it's one of the few instances we have of Disney and their Mickey taking the L in court. Okay, that's not actually what I meant to sit down and record about, but it's a story. No, I was actually thinking more about elections and political stuff and things that are equally as fun to talk about as Paraguayan Mickey, right? I was actually out of the country recently, and I was in Finland. I was riding with a driver from the Gambia. So he moved to Finland, had been there for a while. We were just talking, he was asking, general stuff about the US and it being an election year, typical things that come up. And I found myself saying this, like, oh yeah, it's an election year, so of course, nobody's really on their best behavior. And as I was saying this, like, half of my mind was, of course, thinking about the US and all the usual mess that we're kind of used to seeing right now. I was also thinking about a lot of the countries where I work in, where I have work projects in, places like the Congo, and I actively try, there's a number of countries where I actively avoid visiting them during one of their election years. You know, last year, 2023 was an election year for DR Congo, so I knew that a visit was not happening then, and even for a good chunk of 2024, you still see some of the related aftermath there. And it's like, yeah, people seem to forget how to live with each other whenever it's time to pick a nationwide leader. You know, Venezuela a few months ago, another example, like chaotic, confusing, and regardless of like what your own takes are, I think it's at least agreeable that like people are just more on edge and less cordial with each other. But as I was saying this, I was also thinking, but what's the alternative here? You know, the alternative is being in a place without elections, and that's not necessarily better, or in a place with like sham elections, with less reliable elections. And believe it or not, it can get a lot worse than what we have right now, and we hope it doesn't. Which is why I think it's important to still keep trying to figure out how do we not be on our worst behavior when these times come, because it's a good thing that they come regularly. We want them to, in some fashion. A change in leadership with consistency is a positive thing. You know, more often than not, when you have somebody occupy power for forever, it introduces a lot of problems. But yeah, how do we not go there, where we always seem to go? This sounds counterintuitive, but I know a lot of people are just like, don't bring up politics then, don't talk about it in polite company. I actually think that like if we had figured things out better, if we weren't so on edge, we'd probably actually see people talk about politics more frequently. Like there wouldn't be that weird stigma about talking about it. It wouldn't be like, okay, just avoid those topics, because we would have established safety. We would have established norms of communication around it that are healthy. that we are able to get through. Kind of like the way we're able to talk about sports most of the time. Everybody knows my allegiances. Mostly a baseball, basketball, soccer guy. But yeah, and I have a good friend at work who's a Mets fan, and he's actually one of the people I talk to about baseball the most these days because we talk about it at work a lot. And so when I just think when you have a healthier relationship with whatever that thing is, you're able to talk with your opponents, with people who don't come down the same way. You're able to glean insight. You're not always trying to convert each other. You're just learning. You're learning what it looks like from the opposite point of view, right? I'm not somebody who's just gonna say like both sides of problems and leave it at that, because I think that more often than not we use that as a cop-out. But I will say, like, learning how to enter spaces with diverse viewpoints represented and carry yourself there is an important thing, and it's something you don't see very often. I actually see a lot of the opposite of this, like there's candidates running for office, and then a celebrity will endorse that candidate, so everyone's like, okay, yes, we're all for that celebrity, and then a company that doesn't like that will break their brand deal, so everyone's like, okay, no to that company, and then some athlete is seen using the product of that company, and they're like, okay, that athlete is no longer on our side, and it's just like, wow, we've gotten so obsessive with like picking and sorting and putting people into camps, and it's like you don't even need to make a statement. You can just be seen like using the product of the company that severed ties with the entertainer who did say something. It's that can't be healthy. That can't be good. I think one of the most important paradigm shifts for me has been, so one belief that's kind of gotten stronger over the years is that people are doing the best they can with the information that they have, and that information can be wildly different. And so when you see the different beliefs and takes that people end up with, it's not always a great reflector of their values and morals, and that's kind of tough to swallow sometimes, because it's like I arrive at my beliefs by carefully considering my values and morals against the situation and some strategy. But it really reflects a lot a person's environment and their upbringing and the culture around them. I think remembering this is really important to have more effective conversations, because being able to have effective conversations is part of strategy, is part of how you actually advance good. Now, one more paradigm shift that I found really helpful in just turning down the heat off of any election really is remembering you're hiring someone. And that's all you're hiring someone for a job. I mean, and if I say that's all you're doing, I'm not trying to understate its importance, but so often, and I think this is pronounced in the US a lot, there's a few other places where you see this, but our electoral processes really become an act of celebrity. It's not enough to have good policies, you also have to have camera presence, the personality to deliver those with. And that's because those things influence our decisions, who we like, who we support. And I think so often we've gotten in this habit where we root for our candidates and our parties as if they were our sports teams, right? And that's not how we would approach hiring someone for a position. Imagine you're on the board of directors of an organization, and you might have a favorite out of the pool of candidates for this job, but you're not a fanatic about them. You're not beholden to just being ride or die with this person no matter what they say or do. You're simply saying that based on the info I have on them, I see them as the most suited. And when you're hiring, you're also not looking for like a perfect one-for-one with all your qualifications and all your beliefs. You're probably not going to get that. What you can find are unique things that a person can bring, advantages, and their past experiences. I think if we took this approach, experience would matter a whole lot more I'm not saying it would always be a de facto, whoever's been in leadership longer gets it, because there's also value to having a fresher, new perspective. But past experience as a predictor of future outcomes would be taken more into consideration. And that doesn't seem like a bad thing at all. I think when we approach an election the way we do now, and kind of approach it with a fervor, I think when we approach an election the way we do now, and when we treat our candidates and their parties more like our home team versus our opponents, rather than as candidates for a job, that's when we get this fervor. That's when we see that like our identity is connected to the success of our candidate and our party. And that's not a good position to be in, because when it's not just like, okay, this is who I think could do a good job, but this is who I am, you no longer look critically at the flaws that any candidate would have. So, is there anything that can be done to, make an election process less of an us versus them melee, of a culture war, and more of just a hiring process? I don't know. It's going to take a lot of work. It's not going to take one person, but just remember that as an individual, there are things you can do within your circle, within your sphere of influence. Everyone has a sphere of influence that can move things in that direction. I get it, debates are interesting, but they are really just people pandering to their own sides and trying to wind up with great sound bites. If you really want to know more about how a person would fare in their job, look up policy documents. It's boring. It's a lot less punch than the spectacle of a debate, but it's really, the way you would make a hiring decision. There's this other analogy that I've also been mentally using to think through most elections, and it's like, which gang do you want to run the block? I need more time before I can unpack that and dive into it. But yeah, it makes us stop looking for like perfection and stop advertising perfection out of any candidate, and simply allows you to think through like, who do I think brings safety and a better living opportunity to the people around me, It also makes it harder to manipulate you by like a political party trying to seem like they're on your side, because at the end of the day, a gang's a gang, a gang vies for power. But that doesn't mean you can't have a strong preference over which one you want in power, and you can't have insight as to which is going to keep you and your people safer. So that's just an analogy. I need more time to think about that one. For now, use the hiring one, okay? Anyway, this has been a real fun chat, hasn't it? Paraguayan Mickey, gang-banging elections, and being on your best behavior. So with that, you know what to do. Peace.